Let's start, however, with Rush Limbaugh, trying to buy the St. Louis Rams. Stephen A. Smith is a sports journalist and commentator, and Kevin Blackston, who sits with me as a columnist for AOL's Fan House and is the Shirley Povich Chair, a great honor that is, perhaps up there with the Nobel, in sports journalism at the University of Maryland, nearby here in College Park. Well, the big question is, and I'm not getting to the legality, Stephen, I think it's clear Americans have the right to do with their money what they have the right to do with it. But let's take a look at this. This is Rush Limbaugh back not 1,000 years ago, 2 years ago. The NFL all too often looks like a game between the Bloods and the Crips without any weapons. And in 2006, 3 years ago, Rush said this about Michael J. Fox's struggle with Parkinson's disease. He's exaggerating the effects of the disease. He's moving all around and shaking in his Clarion act. This is really shameless of Michael J. Fox. So you catch this guy's sensitivity in terms of his desire to unite America the way sports generally does in this country. Your thoughts, Kevin? I want to know whether you think it's good for the sport.
It's bad for the sport. It's very bad for the sport. I mean, we're talking about the national pastime right now. That's what the NFL is. And this guy is divisive.
This time of year.
And you know, and this has turned into a field of meritocracy, the NFL has. I mean, we have people of all hues and all positions in the league now, finally. The black quarterback. That's not even a question anymore. Yeah. Even when Rush Limbaugh brought it up on ESPN as an employee de facto with the NFL, and he got kicked out for bringing that up, you know, that's a
well. Let's be fair. Let's be exactly fair. What did he say about Donovan McNabb?
Well, basically,
the Eagles? He said a lot of guys. Here he is. Let's get his quote back in 2003, 6 years ago. Rush Limbaugh said this about the Eagles quarterback, the great Donovan McNabb. Here's what he said: I think what we've had here is a little social concern in the NFL. The media has been very desirous that a black quarterback do well. There's little hope invested in McNabb. There's a little hope invested in McNabb, and he got a lot of credit for the performance of this team that he didn't deserve. The defense carried this team. You say that is
that was ridiculous, and we know how important Donovan McNabb is to that team. And not only that, but
you were raving about his performance yesterday against
exactly. I mean, he was outrageous. But the point is that by the time he brought up that issue, it was a dead issue.
Okay, let's take a look here. This question: what do you think? Here's what McNabb, by the way, said before we get to Stephen. He said this about the possibility of Rush Limbaugh buying the Rams down in St. Louis. If he's rewarded to buy them, congratulations to him. But I won't be in St. Louis anytime soon. Well, I think that depends on the schedule of the NFL more than anything about what Donovan McNabb thinks. Stephen Smith, is this good for the NFL to have Rush Limbaugh as one of the owners in the box?
Well, first of all, I'm glad you made the distinction between what the legalities of the situation and whether or not it's good. Certainly from a legal standpoint, he does have the right. But from the standpoint of whether or not it's good for the NFL, I don't think it is, because he would be somewhat divisive. For me personally, I would like to see him try, and I would like to see the NFL embrace it to some degree, because I'd like to see what African-American players exactly are going to stand up and speak in a very vociferous manner out against Rush Limbaugh like they're claiming they would do. I want to see which players are going to pass up the money that's available to them if the 31 other teams are not going to give it to them. And by the way, let me just throw out this little caveat. It actually would be good for the city of St. Louis, because their team stinks, and at least we'd have a reason to talk about them. But go ahead.
How's the environment down there ethnically? Is it okay in St. Louis?
Oh, I mean, is he
going to add to the melting pot and the happiness of America in St. Louis or not?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't think.
Well, let's take a look at here's something. Let's take a look at one of the Players Association. This is DeMar Smith. He's the head of the Players Association, getting to the point of what the players are going to do. Quote: I've spoken to the commissioner, and I understand that this ownership consideration is in the very early stages, but sport in America is at its best when it unifies, gives all of us reason to cheer, and when it transcends. Our sport does exactly that, when it overcomes division and rejects discrimination and hatred. So he's putting some negative attitude. Let's get Kevin in here.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, this is already a field of meritocracy right now, and why would you invite somebody like Rush Limbaugh into this pot? It's not like the NFL needs to have this particular ownership group. They're going to have choices. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry right now that's doing just fine in a lot of corners of America, and I just don't think that Rush Limbaugh is a guy that they necessarily need.
I mean, play devil's advocate. Will he bring the conservatives to the NFL?
Well, they're already there.
Let me go, Stephen. Is he going to bring in some right-wing attention to the sport? They'll root for his team.
They're already there. Conservatives watch football, from what some of them have told me. But let's be real about something here. And Kevin Blackstone and I have been friends for many years. I look up to him a great deal. Kevin will speak to this it is undeniable. We've got a whole bunch of people in the NFL and in professional sports of African-American descent have been flat-out punks when it comes to addressing serious issues. Fear of fear of fans retaliating, fear of management or ownership getting on them. I understand that Rush Limbaugh would be a divisive force to some degree because he wouldn't fit into the utopia image that the NFL likes to project.
Well,
but the reality is that it would shine a light on guys and whether or not they're really willing to stand up and take stances because God knows they haven't been willing to do it for the last quarter century.
Look, guys, I'm an NFL fan, and I go to the games almost every week at the Redskins. Let's take a look at this. Here's a Jets player, Bart Scott. Going to the very point that Stephen just made rather loudly there, I think you're very excited about this. I want you to respond to this. Quote, this is what Scott said. He's a player. I know I wouldn't want to play for him. He's a jerk. He's an expletive. I imagine what that is. What he said about McNabb was inappropriate and insensitive, totally off base. He could offer me whatever he wanted, and I wouldn't play for him. My principles are greater, and I can't be bought. So he's not going to go play for him. But there's no, players don't get the call when their team goes on schedule.
No. Well, they don't get the call when they go on schedule, but they do have free agency. I mean, this is the 40th anniversary of Curt Flood's fight against Major League Baseball's reserve, which he won. And these players today have free agency, and they can go play for who they want to play for. Now, that doesn't mean that some of them wouldn't wind up being stuck with having to play for a team owned by
let's go. I'm not sure. I think I might be with you, Stephen. I wonder if anybody's going to turn down a career in pro football because Rush is sitting in the way. But let's take a look. Here's what he had to say today about the NFL players like the ones we just heard from who don't want him being an owner. Here he is responding. Rush Limbaugh.
One of the things that is going around out there is that black NFL players will boycott playing the game if I am an owner in the league, which, of course, is patently absurd. But this is being reported, and it's designed to affect the outcome of all of this, which, again, I can't address.
I love the way he's so discreet. He's so careful with his words, Rush Limbaugh. Yes, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, Chris, let me say this in a much more lower monotone, okay? The reality is that you can point to a couple of guys that may very well mean what they say, but they're going to be individuals with options. By and large, the vast majority of NFL players are lying through their teeth when they say such things as most athletes of African-American descent would be lying through their teeth. At the end of the day, the color that matters most is green. They can act any way they want to.
So why are you so angry at that?
Because I feel that there have been a plethora of opportunities over the last quarter of a century for guys to have to step up instead of hiding behind reporters, being scared to address issues. This is what I mean when I point at Kevin. Kevin knows this because he was an outstanding reporter.
What is the issue?
How many times he was used to talk
what's the hidden thing you're talking about? When have players, give me a big thing that everybody watching will understand, where have the players failed to express their true values?
There have been times, whether it's involving free agency, whether it's involving collective bargaining negotiations, whether it involves some of the racial tensions that has existed while collectively bargaining with the leagues and what have you. Players have been petrified of standing up and speaking out on issues, and suddenly you're going to come across and say, you're ready to talk now? It's ridiculous.
But you know what? I mean,
Kevin, you say there's a meritocracy there. This is where your ability to score a touchdown, to do what you have to do, to do a good block, to do what you have to do to kick a good punt, it comes down to talent.
Sure, absolutely.
But he's suggesting there's some kind of racial tension in this sport that holds people back.
Well, I think Stephen A. is talking about guys not standing up for important issues in this country. Yeah. We've had that problem before. But I think the success of Barack Obama, which brought people out and got them involved in the political process more than ever before, and when you get somebody like a Rush Limbaugh who is a lightning rod and who has stood against so many things that these guys stand for,
I think it's
easy.
You know the game of sports better than I do. And the inside the NFL, you cover it. Bottom line, I want you both ready for this, the big one. Will the NFL owners reject the application of Rush Limbaugh to own the Rams of St. Louis?
Yes, they will, because it's not in their political best interest.
Will they reject this offer, Stephen?
Absolutely, they will, because it's not in their political best interest. They'd be
so he wins either way. So he wins either way. He gets to be a victim. Yes. Which is a favorite position of the right these days, by the way. And it always works in this country. If you can prove that you've been screwed by somebody who you make them the heavy, then black opinion, player opinion, public opinion, liberal opinion are the bad guys again. Rush Limbaugh is a hero to his people. Your thoughts? Isn't that what he wants?
Well, that's what he wants. But let me ask you this: why don't his people call him out for being a hypocrite on this as well? Here's a guy who's against socialism, and here is a multi-billion-dollar corporation in the NFL that abides by socialism because they share profits to keep everybody afloat. I mean, and he's embracing that to make a
I think it's pretty capitalistic myself. Anyway, thank you. I saw that movie on Any Given Sunday. I know all about this.